Here we're live. This is Jim Fetzer. It is Sunday at 6:08 p.m. Pacific time. We're doing a very important update on what's happening with the Wikileaks Trump grope plot and the fact that now it's been exposed that the DNC and Clinton was actually behind this grope plot. Give us the details, Professor Jim Fetzer. What happened?
Well, if you take a look at the slide there on WikiLeaks exposing the fake Trump grope plot, it turns out that the Democratic National Committee, or in particular the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton campaign had plotted to have a fake Craigslist Trump employment ad that used the word grope, talked about kissing on the lips and all that. They were setting this up in May, Bill, in order to assail Trump. And if you look at slide 53, there's actually a summary of the story. And then in slide 54, you can actually see one of the emails that has led to this expose. Now, it's bad enough that they're framing Donald Trump with a whole lot of fake allegations about groping women, where some of those are being exposed. On CNN earlier today, for example, the cousin of one of the women who had come out was crying and all that, explained that she never said anything about it, that it had been over 10 years ago, that they were in close contact, that she'd confided in him things that were of a personal nature, and that the anchor just repeatedly tried to assault him and undermine him, but he was absolutely steadfast. In fact, as I recollect now, it was actually on MSNBC.
Okay, who was the guy? Is this a friend of one of the ladies that? A
cousin, Bill. Cousin.
Cousin of?
Yeah.
Of who?
Of one of these women who came out most recently. She's the one who shed what I thought at the time were fake tears.
Oh, yeah.
And they were fake tears, I mean, the Clinton campaign has recruited these women, and I believe they're paying them to make these false allegations.
Yeah, I call dirt for dollars is what I call it.
Dirt for dollars, that's exactly right. And Bill, what's especially disgusting about all of this is that the real perverts are the ones who are attacking Donald Trump. I mean, if you look at slide 55, for example, here you have the hypocrisy in attacking Donald Trump for putting the make on women is overwhelmed by the deceit of Michelle and Barack, where Michelle has a package most women do not have, which means that their children are both adopted and that Barack is gay.
Right.
If you harbor any doubts, just do a search on is Michelle Obama a man? And Hillary, Bill, is in a relationship with Huma Abedin, who is her Saudi Arabian handler. Right. I mean, the situation is disgusting beyond belief. Look at that photograph of Michelle Obama and a package that most women do not have.
Yeah, now there's a reason on dealing with ancient cultic arts that goes beyond sex. And if you look at Baphomet, which is the ancient Babylonian god, it's a hermaphroditic god that's bisexual. So part of the reason why they're pushing this is ultimately the goal of the globalists is to get rid of the idea of male and female sex. They want to have that's why the United Nations has 34 different designations for sexual orientation or sex, and their eventual idea is to eliminate the idea that there is a male or female sex at all.
Bill, that's so absurd. I mean, for a sexually reproducing species, the idea of trying to obfuscate the differences that lead to procreation, I mean, that's simply absurd.
Not really, not if you're a globalist, a satanic maniac, because really their idea is to outlaw wild reproduction, so that people will only be able to submit their gametes to a international global state to control with carbon credits the population, and they'll do polar body exclusion to make sure that there's no genetic traits that would indicate that you might have genes that could fight against the state. And we actually know what genes they are, like the NMDA receptor, which DARPA did research on, and they've actually created vaccines to create plaque at the NMDA receptor. But you can actually eliminate individuals that might carry specific genes that may make them willing to fight against tyranny. And the idea is that you would submit your gametes to a facility. In fact, you don't have to be male or female. They can now convert skin punch biopsies into either sperm or ova. This is possible now with biological systems now. And the first baby born of 3 parents, which means mitochondria from one parent, that because the other parent had one defective mitochondria in the mother. But they've actually stated last December of 2015, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, that they can create an individual from at least 34 different parents. And eventually they'll be able to do what I call xenobiological transhumans. That'll be part animal or human, and cybernetically attached to we call cybernetic digital systems to control their activities and thoughts, which, ultimately what they want is a slave race of transhumans, and they want to have cybernetic and genetic enhancement and life extension technology for the global elite.
Well, that's just dumbfounding, Bill.
Yeah, but I've talked to Dr. Ron Klatz, who recently talked to me this afternoon, and we talked about this, who's the head of A4M, and he was at, I think, 3 years ago at the World Economic Forum in Burj Dubai Hotel in the Middle East, and they were trying to push transhumanism with the World Forum, and they didn't want life extension for the rest of the population, because I'm presenting a lecture this December in Las Vegas, because I've actually cracked the code of what life is and how life extension technologies can actually work in terms of quantum biology. I've been working on this for almost 40 years. And I did my first paper in 1982. I presented to a panel of biophysicists at the University of Calgary, and I built the first morphogenic field machine called a Dynatense. Never manufactured it, but I built it. And I built a dozen of them, and I was one of the team doctors for the Calgary Flames. But I worked out the quantum energy transfer equations, and my work is based on work from Dr. Nesterov at the Nonlinear Institute in Moscow, and Dr. Zhu in China, and many others, including Linus Pauling and other scientists in quantum physics. And what's happening is the globalists want to use genetic engineering and cybernetic technologies because they know they're approaching very quickly in the next 10 years to 20 years the singularity, and they want to be the masters of the world with a massively reduced population that can't reproduce except through licensure through laboratories, and they want to genetically engineer what the underclass will be. So they're trying to create a hive Earth where there'll be an underclass of genetically inferior human beings that'll be a slave class, probably transhuman, part animal, part human, and they want to create an intersex, so you will be neither male or female, just like in different kingdoms, like the lizard kingdom, and only the higher orders actually are capable of having physical sex. That the lower, if you want to call groups, just like the drones inside a beehive, are in a sense neither male nor female.
The lower caste.
The lower caste are basically intersex.
Well, Bill, just to tie the loose ends together here, if you go to slide 56, here's a comment that I posted on one of the websites that's actually addressing this issue. I said, the hypocrisy of attacking Donald Trump for putting the make on women is overwhelmed by the deceit and deception of Michelle and Barack Obama, where Michelle has a package that most women do not have.
Right.
This means their children were both adopted to bamboozle the public, and that Barack is gay. For confirmation, to a search on, is Michelle Obama a man? Her dancing on the show with Ellen DeGeneres leaves no doubt about it. Moreover, Jennifer Flowers has revealed that Bill told her Hillary is bisexual. She is in a relationship with Huma Abedin, who is her Saudi Arabian handler.
Right.
That a straight alpha male makes advances on women is not news. This is blockbusting.
Right. Well, people have to start understanding there's a spiritual and an ancient Babylonian and an exoplanetary basis to this. And I mentioned this on the show with Leo Zagami and others because I have advanced knowledge on terms of the highest orders of the Masonic orders that run planet Earth. All of
you go to slide 57 while you talk about it, because here's Michelle dancing on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and it really doesn't leave any doubt about it.
Yeah, and of course, people are distracted by the fact that they only see the sexual side to this. There's a side, you see, the civilization is based on families where people normally reproduce. Now, there are human beings that are defective. There's genetic diseases that occur. And in fact, much of the degradation to the environment is designed to increase the genetic load of gene disorders. Although with our new genetic technology, we could start healing people genetically that might have a gene polymorphism that could cause problems. For example, if you have a dyslipidemia, there's a simple gene that can be inserted in your liver that would stop the dyslipidemia. And the problem is the globalists don't want to bring life extension technology to the general population. They want to vastly reduce the world population and they want to basically have an underclass that's basically intersex, that doesn't reproduce except through laboratories. And I know this when I presented my data in 1997 to the Human Life International Zurich Board International. They brought me out documents from the World Health Organization on the vaccine against human chorionic gonadotropin to sterilize women, their production of the AIDS virus, which is a recombinant of 3 different spirochetes, and the research to actually create we called human tissue transplantation and other technologies so that they could start hybridizing humans. But now they have what's called a CRISPR protocol, which you may or may not be aware of. And with the new technologies, we can literally create life de novo. We can create transhumans that are part, say, horse and human, just like the ancients did at the time of the Nephilim, which is the fallen ones. If you actually study the highest level of Masonic orders, they tell you that human life on Earth actually originated on Mars, and that there were transhumans that were genetically engineered by a race of super beings that came from the star system Sirius B, that we have been in a galactic and cosmic war and a so-called geopolitical war as well as genetic war with these advanced beings from other worlds. And what we see on Earth is you see epiphenomena, the sexual side and the perversion and so on is not just to degrade the family, it's to subjugate humankind and reduce the population. So eventually we become subjugated to a larger empire that has been fighting with us for tens of thousands of years. So the evil on Earth is exoplanetary, and people may or may not want to accept this, but the sexual side and the perversion side, the best way we described it on Friday with my oldest son Matthew, is that in the biblical terms, Hillary Clinton being a bisexual and her husband being a sexual predator and pervert is to bring in what's called the ancient Babylonian processes that are basically we call the Whore of Babylon. It's to introduce the world to a global empire where there's no national borders, there's no morality, there's no public religions like Christianity or Judaism or even any faith, that a form of agnostic scientistic, if you want to call it scientism, replaces it all with a form of scientific Satanism.
Astounding, Mel. Absolutely astounding.
Right, and this is precisely their plan. If you actually read the letters that were originally, they say, put out there by Albert Pike, although I've heard from Leo Zagami last week that they were actually written by these, if you want to call it, these globalists that were behind him, that were the Jesuits. They call it the Society of Jesus, but the Jesuits have been behind many of the major conflicts in the last 20th century, including the rise of Mao Zedong and the rise of the Soviet Union. What we're dealing with is a kind of evil. For example, even this current Pope talks about exoplanetary, about the quote, the aliens, which are referred to as bringing spirit knowledge that can teach us. And in fact, that's why they have the telescope, the largest binocular telescope in Arizona, at the University of Arizona. That's why they have the Arecibo, is because the Vatican has ancient documents that go back to the libraries in Alexandria and even before, because they collected all the ancient libraries, and they're fully aware of the nature of the genetic engineering in the ancient world. For example, one of my teachers, because I was a Phi Rho Sigma, I was tapped up by the Dean of Medicine before I even went into medical school. The head of hematology said, because I was one of their best students, he wanted to give me private knowledge that, for example, pigs were in the ancient empire of Atlantis, this is probably around 20,000 years ago, genetically engineered to be hybrids between wild boars and humans. And in fact, he showed me very clearly that the major and minor blood group antigens are identical between pigs and humans because pigs are part human. And they were used on the ancient altars of these places because they were sacrificed as a proxy for human flesh. So what people don't understand, because their history is cut off, that's why you'll see it still kind of into the ancient religions like Islam and Judaism, that it's prohibited to eat a pig. It's not just because of the parasites in it. It's because they knew that this was actually genetically engineered as being part human.
Well, of course, I mean, from a point of view of evolution, that there would be similarities between, say, pigs and humans wouldn't be surprising in and of itself.
No, it's not like that. All primates don't have any major minor blood group equivalencies, including orangutans and chimpanzees are closest to us than the primates. The reason why pigs are is because they're actually genetic hybrids. They use technologies that we only are achieving now with the CRISPR protocol. We couldn't do it before. Now we can. We can create transhumans that are parts, say, horse and human, or gorilla and human, or dog and human. We can do that now.
That's fairly astounding.
Like the Minotaur of ancient Crete. We can actually do that. This is possible. People say that, Dr. Deagle, you don't know how to do that. I can give them an equipment list and tell them exactly how to do to splice the DNA and get the types of scanning electron microscopy and micropipettes. I can tell them exactly what to do in order to start the whole process. So when people say you can't do it, the problem is, you see, I have a level of knowledge, both of the ancient knowledge and the modern stuff and classified information, that is most people don't want to accept. So when you see perversions like Michelle Obama dancing on Ellen DeGeneres, this is a process to introduce us to ancient Babylonian mystery religions to destroy the family, because if you destroy the family, you destroy the idea of a constitutional republic, because it's based on the connectedness of humans through genetic ontogeny of parenting, through your great-parents and grandparents and ancestry. And once you destroy the ontogeny of parenthood and the idea of what a human being is, you've destroyed the very nature of a constitutional republic and the idea that we're owned by our ancestors and we have a genetic heritage to our descendants. Once that's gone, there's no liberty anymore, because your genetic liberty has disappeared.
Bill, that's just stunning. That's just stunning.
This is their reason for doing this. And people say, see, I did my first degree in oceanography and genetics 45 years ago. And I finished my PhD in marine bacteriology and genetics in 5 months by sleeping on the lab floor. So I am a lot smarter than the average. I got accepted to MIT in plasma nuclear physics in grade 11 to become a plasma physicist. And I was going to go to MIT. They got a special scholarship for me to do so, and I decided not to make advanced weapons, so I was one of the initial charter members of Greenpeace over 45 years ago. So what I want people to understand is that if you start pulling all these pieces together, what you see is a grand picture of something that's much more evil than just Obama or George Soros or banking. It's something that's far more advanced than the average mortal mind can grasp, because it transcends beyond geophysics, or beyond planetary control of the planet, beyond religion as we see on a public or mundane level that people go to church, to a level that is exoplanetary.
Wow. You know, this is something I've really never researched, Bill. I'm just astounded to hear these things.
Yeah, I want people to understand this, though, because they're not going to hear it from anybody else. In fact, I ministered to a man that had some very serious conflict issues, and he was a 90th degree Mason. And I have personally been approached by the Pindar, who's the guy that runs planet Earth. Okay, so he's a guy that's above the Pope and above all these guys. He personally had an audience with me many years ago. So I know things that virtually almost nobody on the planet knows.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
And I want them to know that. They may say, well, we think you're a nut, Deagle. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I have in my attic documents I got from the World Health Organization, smuggled into the Basel headquarters in 1997, March 16th. I've had first-hand evidence working at with presidential level security clearance at not only U.S. Space Command, but most of the very advanced Tier 1 science projects, including our off-world space projects, Lockheed Martin, Lucent Technology, the Iridium Satellite Project, you name it, I was involved with it. And because I have a photographic memory and advanced technological knowledge in almost every field in science, I don't forget anything. I do Vulcan mind meld, in a sense, asking questions, and eventually I know what they know in their database, and I advance that by asking further questions, and I have access to information, both what I call classical pathways plus classified plus other access that I'm not going to discuss right now, that allows me to know things and integrate it into a one unified model that's extremely disturbing. So when I see this picture that's on the screen right now with Michelle Obama, I call her Mike the Spike.
Yes.
Yeah, and she, you know, this is not just there, it's to assault our intellect. And of course, they set up this dialectic where, you know, Donald Trump is, you know, they say groping or kissing or doing things that are unwanted. And most of this, 99%, is probably exaggerated or ridiculous because he's a media guy. But it's all designed to say, if you talk about inappropriate kissing, it's just as equivalent as forced rape and harassment and driving people even out of the country, like Sally Miller, who I had in my program 3 months ago, talking specifically about how Bill and Hillary Clinton, as a cohort team, harassed this woman to leave the country and go to China. Now, people don't understand. Hillary Clinton's on her last legs. They use body doubles. They probably, if they could, would try to create a clone of her, but they can't do that yet. Or they try to put some kind of robotic copy of her, like the Japanese can make pretty high quality copies. The problem is right now she's probably disappeared because she's using what's called, and I talked to Brian Klatz this afternoon about it, that she's probably sequestered using what's called performance-enhancing intravenous and other drugs to make her function what appears to be at a normal level, although she's dying. And all the evidence I've seen so far tells me she's in the terminal phases of multiple illnesses, including a mass in the base of her brain, Parkinson's disease, double vision, diabetes, hypothyroidism, an array of horrific illnesses that would qualify her for a nursing home, not for the president's office. But it really doesn't matter because she's so evil and so corrupt, they'll put her out there even if she only lives a few months, so they could bring in Tim Kaine, who's a Jesuit-trained proxy, because the real issue is they want to get rid of the idea of the nation-state of America, so we have no borders anymore, and we will then become the force majeure to force the whole world into a cashless system. Now, I'm going to give you some specific details on this. I went to Colorado Springs, and I took care in 1994-95, and took care of some employees afterward for up to 6 years of the Virtual World Project. You might know it on the movie series as The Matrix.
Sure.
I know more than any other human being who's ever drawn breath or had a pulse about the spiritual and the technical aspects of The Matrix than anybody who's ever lived. And the reason is I took care of the employees working on it at Schriever Air Force Base, the primary node for The Matrix, in a Cray array of Cray 4 and Cray 5 gallium arsenide quantum computers. I know everything. How the software works, how they are connected by satellite systems. I've even visited the satellite facilities manufacturing low Earth orbit satellites in Chandler, Arizona. So what people should start to understand is that there's a vast conspiracy that's been going on for tens of thousands of years, and that it's culminating in this political takeover, which is why they even put false information out that Hillary Clinton's way ahead in the polls, which we can say she can't fill a gymnasium and Trump can fill 2 stadia.
I know.
So it means that, and the fact is she's not even showing up to even go on public display, and we have Bill Clinton as a serial rapist, and the daughter, Chelsea Clinton, who's got a mouth on her, and she even says sometimes things that are conflicting with her idea even about Obamacare, and so is Bill. So to say that she's got it in a lockdown, and she's got it already, like the Washington Post said today on October 16th, that she's already won, is they're trying to create a myth that the election's over because of the revelations about the tape from 11 years ago, and the barrage of all these women claiming that he has tried to grab them by the sexual parts and force himself on them when there's no evidence whatsoever that he's a serial rapist or ever been charged with it, or ever had to make a settlement, or has any children as a result of it. So the reason is not so much an attack on Trump, because they see Trump as the final obstacle of them setting up the New World Order, which they have an objective to have it finished by 2020. By 2020, they want the New World Order with any nation who doesn't cooperate. And part of the reason why Russia's involved in a panic over this is because they're fully aware about the New World Order and what's happening, and so are the Communist Chinese, and they don't want to be sucked into this vortex.
Fascinating, Bill. Absolutely fascinating.
That's why the battle between the BRICS and non-BRICS nations is so serious, and why we're literally teetering on World War III and even planning a cyber attack. I watched I couldn't believe it, actually. I saw Joe Biden sitting there with the interviewer asking about what they're talking about when they're saying they're going to do a cyber attack against Russia. Now, cyber attack means one of 3 things to me. You attack someone's power grid, you attack someone's money exchange system, like a credit card exchange system, or you start to send attacks which indicate you could be firing off a nuclear attack, and you want the other side to either respond to that attack or not, whether it's a false one. And any one of those three could precipitate an exchange, and the first most likely exchange would be the Russians would use one of their advanced weapon systems, either by cybernetic attack or space-based weapons to knock out our power grid. I call the weapon of indignation, because they've got to have indignation on how we're allowing this to happen. The second is that the Russians have weapon systems, and I talk about this every day in my show with Tim Alexander pretty well, who's a military expert on hardware, and I am to some extent, that the Russians have upgraded their hardware. In fact, I took care of the Littleton, Colorado, Lockheed Martin subsidiary that was making the RD-80 rockets. That were Russian licensed rockets manufactured in Colorado for servicing the U.S. space station, the International Space Station. And I asked the director of Lockheed Martin why we make Russian rockets. He says, because we haven't made a good rocket in 30 years. That was back 20 years ago. And the Russians have upgraded their technology every year, including their nuclear technology, their anti-missile systems, their S-300. Now they have the S-400. And around Moscow now they have the S-500. There's absolutely nothing we can do to stop the Russians if they decide to push a button and make us disappear. I mean, literally annihilate us. So Putin, who's a decent person, wants to have us collaborate to get rid of ISIS, but all America does is support ISIS and ISIL and support and move the debris around of towns and villages they've already bombed. So Russia's not going to put up with it anymore. They have to get rid of ISIS because they had their own deal they made with the Georgians and with the people from Chechnya. And what they did with the Chechens is they basically said, hey, you can be part of us and we'll forgive everything and you can work with us, or we'll annihilate you. So they'll say, well, we'll forgive it all and you can become part of us. And they took the Russian deal rather than getting wiped out. Right now, ISIS is absolutely determined to get rid of Putin and the current regime in Russia. And it's all part of Saudi Arabia and the American NATO clique to do this. And Russia's not going to put up with it. And they're now collaborating with Mr. Xi of China, who now are creating their own alliances and their own war games, which means we're on a very fast track for World War III. And this latest thing puts us closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis. And by the way, most people aren't aware that for up to 30 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear missiles were in Cuba aimed at all our major cities in the eastern seaboard. Most people have no idea that that actually was the case, that we had to literally agree to leaving the missiles there while we had our missiles in Europe aimed at, our Pershing missiles aimed at Russia. In other words, a Mexican standoff with guns at each other's throat.
No, I just, it's dumbfounding the situation we're in because of...
Oh, it's crazy and beyond belief. I mean, and when I see the smirking salamander of Obama, and here's this Cheshire cat smiling and saying we're going to do a cyber attack on Russia, I said, you're not playing with a little sawed-off place, like, some little island in the Caribbean. You're talking about the most powerful nation in terms of nuclear throw weight and history, with weapon systems that outclassed ours, because we haven't upgraded our systems, including our missile systems, our missile defense. In fact, I took care of people working at the White Sands Missile Defense Facility in New Mexico and Chandler, and also Vandenberg Air Force Base missile systems in California. And I know exquisite details of exactly where we are and what we're doing and how much money and time it'll take for us to make our 3-level anti-missile system work. And we're so full of crap, it's mind-boggling.
It's all just stunning, Bill, how much we've been lied to.
Well, I'm the lie remover. I'm the detergent. So we're trying to get people to wake up and realize we're not making this stuff up. And, there's 3 things as to why we're still alive. We're alive for 3 reasons. Firstly, supernatural protection. I have to thank God for that. Secondly, I'm the big bad wolf. I'm the kind of guy, you cross me, and I'll kill you so fast you won't never know you ever had a pulse. I'm also a legal expert, so I'll go to the State Department, the Federal Court, Supreme Court. I'm like a lawyer as well. And I am very capable of filing lawsuits and opening things up. And the 4th reason is, if someone like me didn't exist, they'd have to invent me. They have to have control of both sides, which is why we have people like Alex Jones, who's basically a agent majeur to actually manipulate and control the information flow. So even if 80 or 90% sometimes of the information is true, it always has this twist or a bend on it that doesn't really get to the real root of why things are the way they are. I don't do any bending. I tell the whole truth, even if it assaults people's religious viewpoints, because most people in this country, in this world, have what I call kindergarten religion, has no idea about the nature of reality. They don't understand the nature of exoplanetary evil on this planet. They don't understand the manipulation of everything, right from the financial and geopolitical systems, and they don't know where the powers that be that control the world are heading us toward a cataclysm where much of the human race is going to cease to exist here very shortly. And they don't believe it. They think we're lying. They think we're psychotic. So this latest deal with Hillary, they're trying to declare her a winner already, when really what they're saying is the loser is going to be every American, because if they flood this country with 600 million more people, with no control of borders, you'll have MS-13 setting up drug houses right next to your home. You'll have gang fights in the streets, and eventually, once you'll have enough terrorism, they'll have a bipartisan security bill, and if you don't take your biometric ID with you everywhere you go, you won't be able to get into a federal building or a shopping center.
Bill, it's just staggering, all of this, simply staggering.
Well, I was the exit examiner for the Oklahoma City Murrah building, and when they discovered that one of the agents had told me, one of the 5 chemical agents had told me, they court-martialed him and they fired me and gave me death threats on the spot, and I countered. I wanted a letter of reference and $50,000 in cash, and if they came within 500 miles of me and my family, I guaranteed Major Schwinder and the other members of the board that I would take them out with Delta Force, which are my buddies. Yeah. And they realized that I'm not just nuts, I am crazy. You mess with me, you die. So they got the money in the letter of reference, and then I worked for other classified companies, including Reserve Admiral John Hughes on Rocky Flats, which you know is a Superfund site that's poisoning Denver. And once they found out what I knew about it, all the NOVA agents got so freaked out when we discovered that the whole site was 10 million times more radioactive than they said, because they had a chain link fence around it and people walking around with their dogs and going for hiking, and the place was completely unprotected. So when I called Senator Tom Daschle back in October of 2001, I told him how unsafe the place was and how all you needed was an APC or a light aircraft, and you could literally ram into some of these open containers, basically standing containers on concrete pads without even a roof over them, with liquid plutonium. It could make the western United States radioactive. He freaked out, and they closed off all the local airports, including the ones in Vail. So I've been through a lot of shit, and I don't take crap off anybody, and my experiences aren't open to anybody's GD opinion.
Well, I think you're making a real difference, Bill, by getting all this out there, and you know that the public should pay attention. That's the.
Well, I'm not one to be maybe not paid attention, and to be honest with you, I don't give a rat's behind what people think about me. I really don't. I care about people because I consider most people juvenile. I consider most human beings driven by what we call base emotions. I care about people whether they hate my guts or not, because I really believe that America is teetering on the end of not only the nation, but we're teetering on world war, because when you're talking about a cyber attack, when you're talking about no-fly zones over Aleppo, and here's what Hillary Clinton said this, and a few days later, a general being interviewed at Congress basically said, if I did that, it would mean I have to declare war on Syria and Russia. Really? You have a missile destroyer sitting in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and you're going to declare war on Russia, and you can't stop their Alexander Mach 9 missiles, the supercavitation torpedo called the Hoot, or any other missile systems the Russians have, including their S-400 system, and you really think that you're going to take them out? Really? Pretty damned insane. So when I see this smirking Cheshire Cat, I'm thinking, what's the end game here, Mr. Biden? What's your end game? What you're going to accomplish by pissing off the Russians?
Well, and Bill, it's so absurd that we are suggesting we would perform a cyber attack on Russia.
And you announce it. If you were going to do something, you sure as hell wouldn't announce it. What is this? Is this a made-for-TV movie? Is this a bunch of rational people? Or is this children who are playing around with high explosives in the garage?
I know, it's ridiculous beyond...
I couldn't believe that human beings, as stupid as people are, I'm constantly surprised at just how insane we as Americans put up with this. So when I hear shrill female announcers going ballistic over and crying on air over Donald Trump kissing people, and most of the stories are fabricated completely. They might be an exaggeration, but they're fabricated completely. And you know, and we're looking at literally two Americas: an America where open borders, no sovereignty, total collapse of the economy, violence, criminals and drug addicts here. I mean, absolute chaos. And Hillary Clinton smiling all the way in to invite, literally, this globalist order that will absolutely trash America. And, of course, with all our weapon systems, it'll guarantee eventually that we'll have a thermonuclear, biological, and chemical war with all the major powers, including Russia and China, and it'll kill most of humanity. And the Chinese and the Russians are completely freaked out by this. I know. The Russians did a drill for 40 million of their people just October 4th to 7th. And if you read RT and their Russian publications, they are completely aware that America is getting ready for a nuclear war. And the
American people, of course, are kept in the dark.
The American people don't even know where the nearest bunker is, if there is one. They didn't even start building bunker systems, and you need two kinds. There's a blast bunker, and there's what's called a radiation bunker. A blast bunker has to be built down deep enough in the ground with enough overburden that when the waves of vibration come in, that it doesn't crush you. And then you have to also have radiation protection. And a radiation bunker is far enough out of the blast zone, which, by the way, people should be aware that the smallest nukes that Russia uses in their throw weight are between 25 and 50 megatons. So you're going to have to be a hell of a long way from any large population center, or you're going to get fried. And to be honest with you, the Russians don't want to do this. They're a natural ally of America. They were during the American Revolution, and yet the powers that be want to make damn certain that we in Russia never get together.
Yes, I've long felt that. Notice whenever Trump even suggested the idea of cooperating with Russia and taking out ISIS, that he was savagely attacked as though that was some form of betrayal, when it's the obvious, sensible, intelligent, rational, and humane thing to do.
Well, the problem right now is what's going on right now. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array telescope got reactivated this spring. Now, most people aren't aware of this, but every 20,000 years or so, and it's on a long cycle, we have the return of a dwarf star called Red Dwarf that has 200 times the magnetic flux field of the solar system called our yellow dwarf star called Sol. And that object, when it comes into deep space, generates very powerful gravity waves that start to affect the nuclear reactors inside all the inner planets. That's why the sun's heliosphere is putting out more radiation than UV, C, and D, X-rays, and cosmic rays, and why all the planets, including Jupiter, are heating up, and why the polar ice caps in Mars are melting. People aren't aware that climate change on Earth is not due to CO2 or even methane hydrates. In fact, the methane hydrates are being released because gravity waves in the mantle of the Earth are releasing them. People need to know this, including the rock called ringwoodite, which Northwestern University and Paul Power from the Primary Water Institute are fully aware is an unstable nuclei. When you hit it with gravity waves, it releases nascent oxygen and hydrogen, which lower the melting point of rock, and all magma, also all earthquakes and volcanoes are driven by nascent oxygen and hydrogen released from ringwoodite when gravity waves hit it from deep space. They know this, and they see this object in space with a gravitonic telescope, which I took care of the employees at McMurdo Bay back in the mid-90s. I took care of the team from Colorado Springs, so I know exquisite details going back over 20 years. And I have more information now that this object now is in the Oort cloud about 0.73 light years out and is pushing hyperelliptical comets into the inner solar system, including Sighting Spring, which is a big damn comet. It wasn't a little comet, it's a big one. And these comets are coming in from deep space that have never been in the inner solar system, pushed by this large dwarf star that has objects the size of Neptune and Uranus rotating around it, and its gravity waves are affecting the inner solar system, and nobody's talking about it. I am, but I'm one of the few that understands the plasma physics and the astrophysics of it. In fact, when I brought Dr. McCanny on, who's got a master's in astrophysics, and of course I did Vulcan mind meld by having him on the show a number of times, and he vastly underestimated my level of knowledge of astrophysics and quantum mechanics, because after a while I started drilling down in questions to the point where he realized he freaked out that I was releasing information he knows, but he doesn't want to talk about. But he freaked out completely when he knew that I was giving specific details about the Atacama Large Millimeter Array and the gravity waves and how it affects the Earth's volcanism, earthquakes, and our climate change that's not caused by CO2 and human activity. But the globalists are fully aware of this, which is why they diverted now up to $8.5 trillion into deep underground military bases. I actually took care of one of the deep drilling guys. His name was John Fiala, who actually worked with Phil Schneider. I was his doctor, so I know specific details of how these drilling machines work underground. And they were drilling back in the mid-90s at a rate, depending on the type of subsurface rock they were going through, anywhere from 7 to 12 miles per day through the rock at 120 feet to rock face, with a sodium-cooled nuclear reactor and impact lasers that would vaporize the rock to a vapor and blow it on the sidewalls to create a zero-debris obsidian core, and then lay a tri-radiate maglev track, as well as fiber optic cable for communication in these maglev tunnels that were unidirectional and vacuumed out to be basically no resistance to airflow. And people don't realize these are all over the planet. They're everywhere, and these underground bases, their favorite place to put them was in dormant magma domes when the lithosphere crust in the Earth moves and leaves dormant magma domes anywhere from 4 to 12 cubic miles in size, or a matrix where they create a pattern back and forth and up and down to create a matrix city underground. But they were building at the time that I was taking care of employees there, Space Command, one new city underground every 7 weeks. So at the time when I was taking care of them, they had over 141 cities in the United States alone, continental lower 48. So I call it the Willy Wonka ticket. So whether you're a congressman, senator, or a senior globalist, or a Silicon Valley character, you want your Wonka ticket, or when things get real bad, you don't want to be on the surface because it could be very bad for X-rays and ultraviolet light, or cataclysmic weather that's unbelievable, like the day after tomorrow. And those kinds of weather systems and so on are going to start happening. Cataclysmic, what's called polar inversions. Just like one of my friends, because I took care of people going up to Baffin Island, and they brought back the tusk of a woolly mammoth that was 26 feet long, the tusk. And they estimated that the woolly mammoth was somewhere between 8 and 12 times larger than an African elephant at full size. And the elephant was frozen solid in a matter of seconds with food in its mouth by being dropped, almost like dropped into liquid nitrogen, where the liquid nitrogen from the upper atmosphere descended on it and froze it like dropping it headfirst into a large vat of liquid nitrogen. And that was somewhere, they estimate, around 13,000 years ago. It could be longer, but it happened really, really quickly. So people don't understand that what we call violent and extreme, what we call tropospheric inversions and these kind of things are real. And the globalists have full intentions of not being around when all this crap starts to happen.
Well, it's unbelievable, Bill, that the world is being sacrificed to...
Well, we could change that. I've said on the air, there is not a problem on this physical earth that I can't provide a solution or a framework for a solution in scientific and technical, geopolitical, medical, and other terms of specific things to do to stop it, or collaborate with scientists from different countries like Russia and China. And if we did collaboration, we could save our planet from cataclysmic effects from deep solar activity from the sun, which has a danger of a kill shot in the solar coronal mass ejection, caused by these gravity waves coming deep space to hit the coronosphere of the sun, or the gravity wave effect on super volcanoes happening, or super calderas being released, like the one up in Yellowstone, or major things like a lithospheric slip, where the crust of the Earth actually moves on the mantle, which has happened in the past. People need to be aware that 8 million years ago, Alaska was on the equator.
Yes.
They don't know this. Most people are so stupid they couldn't get out of their own way. And they don't want to believe that this kind of science is something that's geopolitically being suppressed, because globalists want to blame it on something stupid like CO2, because then they can control human activity and energy generation. So when I see things like, on the one level you got Podesta that's got 75,000 shares in a Russian company, like in space chess, on one level they're collaborating, on another level they're at each other's throats. And Hillary Clinton is without a doubt the most corrupt and vile politician that's ever walked the face of the earth since Nimrod, the ancient Babylonian king, who would send his rabble into a city or town and destroy it, and then tell the local citizens, if you make me emperor, I'll get rid of the rabble. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, more and more black people and Hispanic are starting to wake up that Hillary Clinton is a liar, and she's going to feed the bones of these minorities to the dogs. And it disturbs me because I'm brave enough and intelligent enough to know what these things are, and God's put me in a place where I've actually seen things that most human beings in multiple lifetimes will never see or know. And I have a mouth to speak it and a platform to do so, and I'm extremely concerned that people only get one little tiny fragment of this. Like, for example, we talked about today about the Wikileaks and so on. People like Julian Assange and many people that are in the know are at least partially aware of just how evil this is and how dark the agenda is. But all you need to do is read Agenda 2030 that was sanctioned by not only Barack Obama but by the Vatican last September, and 72 world leaders in a special ceremony at the World Trade Center towers and the memorial to World Trade Center 1 and 2. Those towers and the current One World Center, which is a giant obelisk, which means O Baal-esque. It's a symbol of the ancient god Baal, who was the sun god that lived on Mars. And it means his phallic symbol of his penis means that he's still ruler of Earth, and his spirit and those minions rule Earth and are planning. They did the ceremony because the star system in the belt of Orion is precisely the same angular dispersion as not only the pyramids on the plateau of Giza, but on the pattern of the World Trade Center Tower 1 and 2 memorials and the One World Center in the exactly same angular pattern. There's a reason for it in a spiritual, geopolitical, and ancient Babylonian mystery religions going right back to Sumer, Egypt, Atlantis, and Mu. People don't understand this. They need to start understanding it because their little parochial idea of good and evil isn't going to explain to them what's going on.
Bill, you got it right. I mean, Americans live in a simplified world
I can't
propaganda from every direction all day long, 24 hours a day.
I can't go to a public church in this country or in Canada because people are what I call pre-kindergarten. And when you start to explain to them the real nature of what human beings are and the nature of physical reality and the higher, what we call hyperspace, and the nature of the astral realm, the higher realms of existence, in terms of beyond regular quantum physics, and how what we're doing is we're being subjugated to our gradual degradation of the human race to terminate us because we're about to leap and become what's called a galactic civilization. 1,000 years from now, you won't recognize what human beings have become. We will have populated tens of millions of planets across the galaxy. We'll have become capable of applying not only the wormholes, but transecting across dimensional spaces and literally having limitless lifespans where we can actually be if you want to call it, a midwife to other civilizations that are going through the birthing process. But that's never going to happen at the rate we're going right now. We'll be terminated and aborted as a planet through, I call, global omnicide and stupidity, because we don't face the nature of the evil we're facing.
Bill, Americans are just massively ignorant and scientifically illiterate and very gullible receivers.
But do you know why they are, though? Do you know why they are? And I've discovered this. They've discovered it for 3 reasons. People are nice. I'm not nice. I care about people and I love them, but I'm not nice. I'm the kind of person that comes at things with 2 armed 7-foot claymores, like the Scottish claymores, singing in the wind, ready to chop people in terms of their geopolitical stupidity, not to hurt people, but to hurt their stupidity. Because you see, if we don't chop off the bands off people in terms of their ignorance of the nature of reality and what's going on, because like when you see Michelle Obama dancing there, people say, well, that's that's insulting and that's awful. But they look the other way and they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton now. You look at women that are upset about, and they cry on air about Donald Trump kissing, say, beauty contestants, but they don't have the same revulsion to Bill Clinton, who actually assaulted women, bit their lips, threatened some of them to kill them, and then Hillary Clinton literally killed people's cats and actually threatened them to destroy them. And we had Sally Miller on the program who actually had to leave for China. These women are afraid for their lives. In fact, if Hillary gets in, all the women who have publicly come out in debate number 2 should fear for their lives, because the number of I call Hillary Rotten Clinton, the number of people that have died in response to doing any opposition to Hillary Clinton is mind-boggling.
Yes.
Yeah, and anybody who doesn't believe this, and they're living in this kind of cartoonish world, Pollyanna world that thinks that everything is nice and people are reasonable. I'm an old trauma burn doctor. I've seen human beings do to each other things that most human beings don't even believe exists. I remember one of the first things I saw as a fourth-year medical student is I had to pronounce a young man dead who was hung by piano wires upside down in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the Point Pleasant Park after they disemboweled him, cut out his genitals and his eyes and tongue, and then they asked me if the man was dead after his heart was actually taken out of his chest. That was one of the first things I did, and they asked me, is this guy dead? I had to pronounce it right in the death certificate. He was disemboweled, his tongue, genitals, and eyes were gouged out of his head, and his heart got cut out, and they did it in a satanic ceremony, and because I was a runner at the time, I ran right through the Covenant next week later, and they tried to chase after me and get me, and I managed to outrun them because I'm a pretty fast runner, especially when you're scared to death. But I can tell you, people do not understand the nature of reality. And that includes most of these churches that are fully infiltrated, including Islam, Christian churches, Jewish churches, synagogues, whatever. Most of the public churches are heavily infiltrated with Satanism. It's rare that they aren't. So it's not surprising many people are what I call thinking agnostics, or even tempt to think they're atheists, because they can see most public religions are vile. Does that make sense?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's the reality. And that's all by chance. I mean, not by chance, it's all by design. So when I see this picture now, it's the Clinton campaign, John Podesta tied to Russian mafia, and we see this prize-winning journalist, Hillary approved sending sarin gas to rebels. Journalist. Hillary approved sending sarin gas to rebels to frame Assad. I'm amazed, and I say this on my show, but because I really don't get any detractors. Nobody in their right mind is going to come on air and try to argue with me. I'd never get anybody in their right mind. I have some people to try to confabulate, but I say in my show, and I tell the board office of Republic Broadcasting, this is no Yahoo zone. And I don't care if I insult people. I said you have to state precisely what your question is or statement is. And if you don't get on air. And if you do want to fence with me intellectually, I'm going to put you in a Brazilian intellectual headlock and stop the flow of thought to your brain and make sure it's shut down. And people say, Dr. Deagle, that's not very nice. I said, why the hell should I be nice when the future of humanity is at stake? I consider myself like one of the ancient prophets who had to scream from the top of the hill when the caravan's going by with a sack of honey and locusts, because people don't want to believe you even though you know the full truth. And I don't care. I really, really, really don't care. I'm not afraid to die. I don't care what people think. And I'm going to blast the truth at them until finally, when things start to happen, they beg me to tell them more about what the hell's going on. Unfortunately, it's getting so close to catastrophe, I don't know if people are going to survive what's coming. Because if they just collapse the financial system and don't recharge the EBT cards, what are you going to do when you have 48 million Americans, many of them violent blacks and poor people who will go ballistic when they can't eat? What are you going to do when you have open borders and you tell the border guards to let anybody in, even if they're bringing out literally carloads of illegal drugs? What are you going to do when they have all kinds of weapon systems moving in here and you have no control whatsoever, although you're trying to disarm the public, which you try to prevent them? And then the white public, which, again, remember, if you tick off the white people, there's nothing more dangerous on earth than ticked off white people, which is you reach a certain threshold and you're going to see the rise of neo-Nazism and white supremacy. And if you don't want it, you're going to get it. And when it happens, it's going to be the most violent thing on earth, that people like Hillary Clinton and these leaders that try to march us down the gallows or the place to have your head chopped off, there's going to be a lot of dead politicians, a lot of them. They can't imagine what we'll do to them. They really can't, and they're vastly underestimating the violence of righteous people going crazy because we can't take it anymore. They're really, really underestimating us. Because the amount of energy that I see, that's why Trump raised $100 million just in the last few days, even since these tapes were released, because people know how desperately evil things are and how bad it'll get if Hillary gets in. In the first 6 months, the appointing of these judges, the changes in their military operations in the Middle East, the interactions with Russia and China, the opening of borders to all kinds of criminals and 550% more, and major terrorism on American soil and airports. Like, for example, here's a scenario. because I know I work with the government on war games. I was the point man under Reserve Admiral John Hughes on Operation Top Off and Dark Winter, radiological and biological terrorism. And we also did a computerized war game at a NOAA computer in Boulder of someone coming in from Cairo with a new weaponized form of smallpox, but we also did a war game on someone blowing up a radiological bomb at the Federal Center downtown Denver. We also did a war game at the Performing Arts Center, and on 17th Avenue we put a sprayer in the second floor window, and we had our EMTs and hazmat officers go to the local hospitals, including St. Joe's and PSL and the University of Colorado, and trying to see if they would figure out exactly what kind of radiological or biological agent was sent, and how to reverse it and identify the causes and intervene so people didn't die. And we actually succeeded in killing everyone. We absolutely failed so miserably, no one would survive. And so I met in March, before 9/11, with the FBI and CDC national directors, personally, face-to-face, at a private dinner at the Adams Mark Hotel with the head of the infectious disease unit of the University of Colorado, because Mr. Reserve Admiral John Hughes had no background in infectious disease, but I did. So when I asked these characters questions, because they would only give you plausibly deniable answers, I realized that they were going to do a war game in New York City within 6 months in the fall. They were going to release anthrax, and they were talking about micronukes. Already, this is 6 months before 9/11, and a NORAD-based U.S. Space Command war game, which is what 9/11 was. It was a war game that went live. People don't know that. That's the most important primary thing is 9/11 was a war game, and so was Oklahoma City. It was actually a controlled demolition of the Murrah building, which construction was so hard compared to the Khobar Towers with the same munitions team that went to Khobar Towers in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. There was 7 times more ANFO, and it just blew the windows into the building in Khobar Towers in Riyadh, and had pillars inside the building were turned into an atomic vapor inside the building. So what I'm very worried about is either at or right after this election, if Hillary gets in, we're going to have a level of terrorism and a number of dead that'll make 9/11 pale. And the tyranny that I see coming is so vile, you know, and we're not talking about just regular stuff. We're talking about robotic drones, autonomous weapon systems, bearcats with foreign agents. People don't know that there have been war games going on for decades, even during previous administrations of George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton, of foreign agents on our soil doing, through the United Nations, war games, and I know exactly where even the equipment is stored. A lot of it in Colorado, a lot of it around the Gulf states, and they had to move it inland because they were worried about a tsunami caused by the methane hydrate surge, so they moved all the equipment for the United Nations 100 miles in. So what people need to grasp is that the level of tyranny they have planned on America is blisteringly mind-boggling. And the average person is completely ignorant of it. They think that I'm making this up. And no one, and I mean no one, is giving the full truth like I am. Nobody. Because they don't know. They weren't there when I was working with Admiral Hughes and the CDC and FBI national directors. They weren't there when I did the exit exam on the munitions team from the Murrah building. They weren't there when I presented in 2007 the information I got from Dr. Ed Ward, 2 nuclear scientists and a munitions expert from Finland that proved exactly what you did with your own group of scientists, that 9/11 was not only a war game, an inside job, but also as a nuclear demolition of the World Trade Center towers as a promulgation to start an illegal war, but also to get rid of a sick building and insure it through the Blackstone Group to build the Aria complex and start the whole process of devolving the American economy to a global economy. And I'm really concerned. We have 3 weeks to Election Day, and if Americans don't get up off their ass and realize if Donald Trump doesn't get in, it's not only the end of America, it's the end of the human race. We will cease to exist as a normal, cognitive, non-dissonant, and non-genetically manipulated and screwed up human race. This is the end of the road. This is not like a rehearsal. This is the big show.
Bill, I think you've hit the nail right on the head, and we have, most Americans, no idea what's coming.
Oh, I do, in exquisite detail. And I'm only, believe it or not, I'm only telling you 10% of what I know. I can't tell you all, or your hearts would stop. If you knew what I knew in total detail, you would flatline.
Well, Bill, I can't thank you enough for having me on for this first hour of your show today, and it's sensational that you're on the air and have the opportunity.
Well, I want you to talk about this too with the issue about with this WikiLeaks thing, because it seems that they've got so much focus on these serial women. I think the 9th woman came out trying to say that Donald Trump assaulted her. I think in the next thing, Donald has to sidestep this and say, look, this is exaggerated foolishness. I need to concentrate on the issues. I'm glad that Chris Wallace is going to actually only allow the last segment to deal with the fitness to be president. Because to me, Donald Trump is a successful businessman. Right now, he was a baby Christian who's grown up real damn fast because he's exposed to suffering Americans, policy meetings with military people, briefings, and the man is not stupid. That's why he has his own security force, and that's why about a month and a half ago, a man who was a former FBI officer who was killed was caught by his own security forces at his Trump Towers with a Glock gun trying to kill Donald Trump with no numbers on it. They weren't filed off. They had no numbers, which means this is a CIA op, and the man was dead, or FBI CIA op. So the fact he was a registered dead guy, this is what's called a hired killer who was actually literally wiped from being in existence so that they could never trace anything back because the man's supposedly buried already. And if it's getting this bad, the tyranny that's going to follow if Hillary gets in, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start releasing technology and information that and I'm not just physical technology. I know about other kinds of technology that this government, these people have no idea I'll do. We're not talking about just military and weapon systems. I'm talking about things that are going to change the nature of reality. And I am beyond rage. Rage is not a strong enough word for what I see coming because I think this is going to get so crazy that the average person is now starting to kind of perceive with this election cycle just how bad it is. So, any closing comments you want to make, Jim?
No, I just think it's fantastic that you're sharing your knowledge with the public, Bill, and,
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily say that people have to believe me, but when they see the vast array of what it is, they can start connecting the dots and realize, why does it seem that they keep on pushing the sexual perversion in my face? Why are they talking about open borders? Why is Hillary Clinton talking about open borders? Why are they talking about globalism? What's their purpose pushing carbon credits? Do they think carbon credits are going to help or alternative energy? I know how to make alternative energy. In fact, I've been talking about for almost 8 years how to make a tokamak fusion reactor because I got taught a lot of the information from the guys at U.S. Space Command because we already miniaturized it many years ago. So the reason that I'm very concerned is that we have liars like Hillary that's going to say we're going to replace it with solar and wind, which she's full of it. And their real purpose is to get rid of most of the human race. And people don't get this, especially unfortunately the uneducated poor in America and around the world don't realize they're literally marked for murder. Marked for murder. Marked for omnicide. Yeah.
No, I can't thank you enough for having me on, Bill. Really terrific.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So I know some of the things I said were probably seem over the top. Unfortunately, it's not. And I think that when they see all these WikiLeaks and the FOIA documents coming out, when you see the list of things that she says she's completely lying about, and if you put it together into the larger picture, you realize we're dealing with something that's so evil, so corrupt. I mean, can people wake up in the morning the day after the election and have Hillary as president? I think not. And even these shrill women who are, we're so upset that Donald would kiss somebody. Really, there's no evidence he raped anybody or had any illegal descendants. It's not like the royals of Europe that we know, the chambermaids, right? So this idea that they're morally equivalent, Bill Clinton and Hillary and Donald is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes. Bill, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
I appreciate it.
It's super.
Yeah. I hope that kind of makes it probably fits in and explains a few of the puzzle that you may not have understood before. Yeah.
Fantastic, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You take care.
Thanks.
We'll see you tomorrow, first hour.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.